here we are, and we're going to be talking today about shamanism, change and balance from our perspective of how we work with it and our experiences, and also hearing some of your questions. Mm. And as we begin, we just want to take a moment, whether you're listening live or whether you are listening afterwards. We really want to welcome you all. We want to welcome you to this space and welcome you to the circle. And we want to welcome everyone, seen and unseen, heard and unheard, and to just arrive in this space together and feel where you are right now. It's a very good thing to begin with feeling more deeply where you are. And so if we're going to be talking about change and balance, let's take a moment and just really feel where you are in this moment, where you are on the earth, where you are in your body, where you are in your soul, in your mind, in your relationships, the seasons, and just arriving in this moment. That's all we can do really through life, is to keep arriving in this moment. And we're really happy to be talking with you today about change and balance together with the spirits and shamanic work, because as you like to say, Jonathan, life is change.
Life is change. It certainly is.
Yeah.
And in shamanism, life is change. And change is something we step into with power. Right. Early lesson I got from my spirit teacher, because we don't step into change alone. We step into change together with our spirit helpers and teachers. And change, of course, is a great opportunity for learning for those of us who will learn. Right.
And we're going to talk more about what we mean by working with change through power. And we'll come to that in a little while. And this is sort of, all of our shamanic work is really about this. So do you want to say a little bit about what power means to you, what you mean by power?
Power. It means so many things, but this is really at the essence of shamanic practice, isn't it? Mm. Because we all are alive. That's our basic energy, our basic power. But having a shamanic practice means that you can ask for help to have more power, to connect to the power of the universe, and to bring that power into your daily life. And this is really a wonderful, wonderful ability, and the wonderful gift of shamanic practice, for me anyway. Because when I first started working with shamanism, I was at a time in my life where I felt like I was a leaf being blown around in the wind, and without my own power at all, and no power at all. And then I was introduced to this practice, and all of a sudden I realized that I wasn't alone. And this is a very wonderful, empowering realization. And so that's it in a nutshell.
And when we talk about power for us in shamanic terms, we don't talk about power over, right? We talk about power through. And what we mean by that is we don't use power energy to try and affect other people, manipulate, control, even if it's kind of well meant. We don't do that. It's not up to us, and it's not a good game to play. It doesn't bring good things.
Right.
And so what we do is we try and work with life force, and we always ask for help for ourselves, you know, because we are part of the web of life. And so if we change and we do our part, then it will also ripple out into life in a good way that is more in balance with the whole.
When I started off working with shamanism, in Danish there are two words for power, and one is magt and one is kraft. And magt is the power over, the controlling power, and kraft is the uplifting and supporting power. And a lot of people really, I think, in a way, in the Western world, we're encouraged to control our lives rather than to step into our lives. And for me, this is the essential difference. And when you mix kraft and makt, right, it's sort of like yin and yang. You can't really do the one without doing the other, but you don't want to have the one to be necessarily more powerful than the other. You want them to be able to work together, And so the idea is not to control situations. This is the big pitfall of politicians, right? And it goes hand in hand with their work. But occasionally you find a politician who does have this feeling for energy, right? And I can, without getting into that discussion, it's an interesting one to think about. But in shamanism, the idea for me, when I started, was to have the power so that I did not necessarily feel that I was controlling my life, but I had the power to step into life, whatever it was that was coming my way.
And this is so relevant when we're talking about change, because we're going to move on in a minute to talk about many different types of change that you can encounter and different types of responses to them. But in a way, very often when we are facing change, we want to control, right? We want to try and maybe even if we're happy with it and we've been expecting it, we still want to control. We want it to go a certain way. And so again, it can be a fine line between trying to control power or flow with it. And so this is why our basic approach to working shamanically with change is we don't try and go in there and try and change it, right? We don't try and control the change. But what we do try and do is either ask for help and power to stand in the change and move with the change, right? So, you know, because like maybe there is a change you just can't do anything about. So then you're asking for help to just like be there so that you don't disappear, and you have an anchoring, you have a connection. So that's a wonderful thing. And the other thing is to, before you try and do anything with the change, is to just try and ask to understand more about what it's trying to show you. Why has it come? What is it trying to teach you? And maybe this one change now, even though it might be strange, scary, boring,
or seemingly insignificant,
going in the wrong direction, it might be taking you to exactly where you need to go, or some other good place. And I have to say that I guess it was about 15 years ago when I really started to have this felt understanding of what it meant to meet life instead of trying to decide what I wanted my life to be. And I suddenly realized how much more interesting life became when I was just present and open and asking for help to meet life. Because then the universe was providing me with amazing possibilities, some challenging, some fun, but just so much more than I myself could have planned or wished for or thought of. My brain is pretty good, but it's very small compared to the universe. And so I felt that when I allowed myself to really step into change and move with life, then life got so much bigger. And then my role is just to be here and be able to dance with what comes. That's it, really.
That's it. Okay. Good night, everybody. No, that really is it. That's the essence of everything.
Yeah.
And of course, the shaman does this not through willpower, right? Because this is what we learn as in school or as young adults, that it's all about willpower, right? But it's much more than that. My will is insignificant in comparison to the power of the universe, right? And so the shaman knows that by contacting her or his spirit helpers, there's an infinite resource available immediately. And that resource can be brought to a situation. And in the course of the years, and I found this out early on in my shamanic practice, once I really stepped into the practice, my spirit started setting up situations for me, just as a Zen master might do, right? And they would set these situations up for me, and then see how I responded. Right? And if I remembered to work together with my spirits in it, then it generally turned out all right. But then sometimes I forgot totally about that possibility. And then life got very exciting in a slightly uncomfortable way, or perhaps in a very uncomfortable way. Right? So it was exciting and special. But this is what separates shamanism from everyday life, basically. Because in everyday life, we often, and still happens to me, I think of myself as an independent body moving somehow or another through life, right? And immediately it becomes much more difficult. But when I remember my connection, remember that power is available for me, then all of a sudden, new avenues of possibility open up.
And you talk a lot about, we talk a lot about the difference between want and need, because you were talking about willpower earlier, and we sort of really like pressure that to get what we want. But and there is such a thing as an intention, but an intention is different from a goal. But would you like to just talk a little bit more about the difference between want and need in our spirit practice?
Right. You summed it up very well just now. And want generally pushes the control button. I want this. Whereas need opens a door. And I can remember numerous occasions where people have said to me, yeah, but I don't want to be needy. I don't want to be needy. Well, sorry, folks, but we are all needy. As the wonderful English poet John Donne pointed out several centuries ago, no man, or woman for that matter, is an island, right? entire of itself. We are all a part of the continent, right? And I would change that to say we're all a part of the universe.
And as we said, when you're working with intention, of course you can start from a place of what you want, but as you step into the work, open to what you need. And very often we see that when people go to the spirits to ask questions or ask for help for what they want help for, which is often very good things, they don't always get what they want from the spirits or from life, but we might get what we need. And sometimes it's very difficult to see that because we're so focused on what we want that we become totally blind to what we are given. And so we feel that we haven't been given anything because we weren't given what we were looking for, what we were expecting, and ultimately what we want. And so it's fine to go in with this feeling of I want, or I would like, I wish, but then open up to the possibility that the spirits might feel that you need something more or quite different.
Quite different.
And as we do that, we really step into life.
Yeah, you were mentioning intention a moment ago, and this is a really a key word, I feel. What are your intentions, right? And what are your intentions with life? Or what is your intention for tomorrow, right? And when I go to the spirits, when I do this work, I start with an intention. And to be very honest, the intention is often grounded in something I want. And it's generally reasonable. You know, I've gotten beyond the thing of wanting to have a great big shiny car and stuff like that. You know, it just, you know, I want to be a better person, for example, right? And when I go, I formulate an intention before I go to the spirits. And that intention generally is based on what I want. And very, very often, when I come back, I realize that they haven't given me what I want at all, but they have given me what I need. And when I feel into that, it's much more satisfying.
And healing.
And healing. And healing. And absolutely.
This is often what can happen with change too. And that when it comes, if it's unexpected or maybe not requested, then it can feel that your life is not your own. Your life is being taken over. And that can be a very difficult place to be. And we're going to go on a little bit later of talking about how change and balance can really be good companions on the road. And but so we can also open to the idea that the change that comes, even though it might be very hard or very painful or very confusing, that there is something in it that maybe we will need. And then it's taking time to just stop and unpack that a little bit, and that can take time. And what we can do in life is to just work on our regular relationship with change. So when big change comes, I'm a little bit more prepared. I'm not suddenly thrown out of the water completely. I'm there and I'm saying, okay, I recognize this, and I've had some experience in working with change before. And that means that you have some ground to stand on, and you won't just kind of feel like you're totally disconnected. And a very wonderful way to begin to work with this is to work with the natural change that occurs around us every day, wherever we live. You know, we're living here in Sweden, in Northern Europe, and You're in many different places. So, but every day, whatever the seasons are, whatever the weather is, there is constant change going on. And nature is never static. Nature is always changing. And when I go to nature and learn how to work with the power of the seasons, and this is what this course that's starting on Sunday is going to be all about, the rhythms of life. When we begin to learn about working together in sync and in harmony with the power of the seasons, whatever those seasons may be, we start to learn to live together with change in a way that becomes maybe helpful, fruitful, instructive, but also natural. We get used to it. We get used to moving with change. We get used to things changing. And that in itself can be a wonderful thing. And for those of you coming on the course, we'll be going much more into that. But so we just wanted to start there about just sort of beginning to look around you every day, and just all you can do is just acknowledge some change that's going on, and just feel how you feel about that, or just recognize it and acknowledge it, and feel how it is when life is constantly moving and constantly changing, and it doesn't fall apart. It's a natural thing that life needs. It needs that energy to flow. It can't just be static.
It's so strange to hear us talking in a way, because I can't help but look back on my life, and I remember when I was a teenager, there was one thing I really wanted to be, and it was like I wanted to be exactly like everyone else, right? And I wanted to fit in. And then one day I had this realization when I was 18. It was just before I graduated from high school. And I looked around at all my classmates, and we were outside. It was lunchtime. And I realized that my path, for somehow or another, I had this powerful realization that my path was not going to be like everybody else's. What I didn't realize at the time was that nobody's path was going to be like everybody else's. We have this desire to conform at certain times of our life, and some people keep that desire all the way through their life. But in fact, we're all different and we're all the same. It's this wonderful yin-yang situation all over again, just expressed in yet one more way, right? And that was a very scary thought at the age of 18. I was a young guy, relatively inexperienced, and with a huge desire to experience life, right? And that has led me to some very special places, some wonderful places, some terrifying places, and places in between. And I think there's a very good chance that each one of you can say the same thing about your lives. And so shamanism is not a way to control life. This is what we're trying to say. The practice we use, the practice we have, is about stepping into life with power. Shamanism is stepping into change with power.
And so wonderful to hear you talk about that, and we'll come back to that, about how to really step into the change. And that's one thing is when the change comes, but then there's like the next step, which is to really step into it. But before we get to that, which I hope we'll remember, I just wanted to get back to what you were mentioning about being a teenager
Mm.
and about how in many, many traditions and also lots of ceremonies remain in a lot of our, certainly here in Europe, um, where we mark certain times of life. And this was a very common thing, for instance, when children turned into adults. That teenage phase wasn't really existing in other cultures, you know, and other times until quite recently. But so, or when there was a great change happening. So, a great change was maybe when a girl started to bleed and become a woman, or when somebody died, when somebody got married, when you stepped into life as an adulthood and becoming mature, becoming an adult, you know, taking responsibility for your own life and not blaming other people for it. These were very big moments in life, and they were recognized traditionally as such. And so they were. This is why the classic rites of passage. You know, the rites of passage is that you have to step into change. You go through something that will change you, and then you come out the other side, and you are changed by it. And I remember a time in my life some years ago when I was facing a very, very big change that was bringing me a huge amount of uncertainty. And I could tell that I just wanted to sort of sneak around it. I just said, well, can't I just sneak around it and get to the other side? And my spirit said, but then you'll be the same. You won't have learnt anything. You won't have shed anything. You won't have received anything. It is by going through the experience that you become changed and that you become more of who you are, if you do it together with them. And I certainly couldn't have done it without them and some other support too. But with their power, I could step through the change. You step through the rite of passage. And that can be very scary as you're doing it and you think, oh, I can't do it. And you do it. And then you literally are changed by the experience. So while you're in the middle of it, it might feel like nothing's happening or everything's happening and everything's going crazy. But you hold on to your thread, you hold on to your path, you hold on to your connection to your spirits, and you keep going through it and you keep asking for help to go through it, because that is how you change. If you try to sneak around, nothing will really change. And it can be a very hard thing. And so there is a very important aspect here, which is the role of ceremony in this work around change. And again, we're going to go into this more on the Rhythms of Life course, but the role of ceremony can be very important, whether you have a big ceremony with a community where everyone has witnessed your change, that you have now moved from childhood to adulthood, or, you know, becoming married or dying. Everybody has witnessed it. So that means that it's the whole community has been affected by it, has been changed by it. The balance has shifted in the community. But you can also use ceremony just for yourself. And so if you know that you are about to go through a big change, or have gone through a big change, or in the middle of it, you can use ceremony, very simple ceremony and ritual, to really help to acknowledge that. It's not only asking for help to go through it, but to acknowledge the change that has happened. That in itself can give you this very strong, stable ground to stand on for the next phase of your life.
And it really is a wonderful way of marking a threshold. And so that is another really important aspect of ceremony, I feel, that before the ceremony, you're in one place, and after the ceremony, your life has changed. You're in another place. And of course, this is actually happening every day and every moment. But when you take the time to mark it, something special happens. Something special happens. And in the West, we do have some ceremonies like that, especially if you're brought up in an organized religion. For example, if you're brought up a Roman Catholic or in some Christian, other Christian religions, you have a confirmation when you're somewhere between 10 and 14 years old, right? Where you confirm that this is my path, right? Baptism is another one, but most of us, when we're baptized, we're not aware of what's happening to us. This is something that's done for us, so to speak, and we receive a name. In a lot of traditional cultures, you might be given a name very early on, and then later on, when you're what we call a teenager, something might happen so that you receive another name. And in many cultures, people step into adulthood at the age of, well, anywhere between 9, unbelievably, and 14 or 15. So there are these thresholds in life. And a beautiful exercise, I think, is to look at your life and find the thresholds. Find the thresholds. And some of them...
The times of change.
The times of change, where you actually can see, my life changed at that point, right? And interestingly, for me, for example, to use a really bizarre example, is when I was 22 years old, I was drafted into the United States Army. And fascinatingly enough, they put us into a ceremony, right? There we all were, a bunch of young guys.
They didn't call it that.
They didn't call it a ceremony. They just did it to us, and wham, it worked, because I had been really resistant to getting drafted. I tried everything I could to not get drafted. Finally, I gave up. They got me. And they called me to this meeting place and with 20 other guys. And they said, the sergeant walks into a room and he's standing in front of the American flag and he says, okay, you guys, pay attention. And as we all paid attention. And lift up your right hand and repeat after me. And so we lifted up our right hand and repeated after him. And then he said, okay, now take one step forward. We took one step forward, and he said, you have stepped out of civilian life and into the United States Army. And that was it.
And you could feel that.
I could feel that. I could feel that. And I could also feel that there was a part of me that just said, no way. And that part of me went out the back door and I didn't see him again for 20 years.
So in terms of ceremony, there was a question here, what kind of ceremony to use? And ceremony is a very, very wide term here. And we're also going to have our ceremony course again later this autumn. So if you want to learn more about ceremony, you can come on that. But it can be anything really where you create sacred space. And we have a free talk on sacred space if you want to think about that more. If you know how to journey to ask your spirits for help, you can journey to ask for a ceremony. Please show me a ceremony I can do to step into this change, right? Or you can do something very simple. I mean, great if you have access to a fireplace, but if you don't, you can just have light a candle with intention, maybe read out some words, do a bit of rattling or a bit of singing, and just feel it. So the idea really with ceremony is that you're making a special space, you're acknowledging something important, And then you're allowing that to happen and be recognized either by yourself, by the spirits, by life, by the community. And then you know that things will not go back. This is also why it's very good to do commitment ceremonies, because you think 3 days later, you think, oh no, what have I done? And then you remember, no, I said yes to something, so I'm going to stick with it, you know. And this is also why we get help along the way, because we might waver and lose our balance and lose our way. And yeah, you want to say something more about that?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. But a ceremony, again, I love this word, is threshold,
Yeah.
terskel in Danish, right? Like stepping through a door, right? When we do shamanic work here, and send people out for a medicine walk, I say, be aware of the thresholds you cross. It might be an opening in the stone wall, or maybe you crawl over a stone wall, right? But think about what happens when I crawled over that stone wall, or walking between two trees, right? And a wonderful, simple ceremony that you can do yourself is, if you make a decision, a life decision, and you decide that you really want to follow this decision and you want to mark it with a ceremony, step over a threshold.
It can just be like a line or a twig, or literally going through a doorway,
Right.
But you're doing it with intention.
Right. And in America, maybe in England too, that is this expression, a line in the sand, right? You can draw a line in the sand with a stick, or on the earth with a stick, or just lay a stick on the ground and step over it and say yes to this decision that you've made, and know that it is made.
It's very powerful, and it really makes a difference. It might seem like a small act. It might even take just 5 or 10 minutes. It might take a whole day, but it can make a very big difference in your life, so that if you really want to step into change, you don't want to fall back, because it can be very tempting to just want to go back to your familiar life. Even if it's a change you really, really want, you step into it, and maybe it's not exactly how you imagined it was going to be, or it is, but it's just a bit uncomfortable, or it's too new, and a part of you says, oh, why don't we just go back to how it was so much easier. And so then you hang on to something because you remember that, no, I want to keep stepping into this change. It's something I really, really want. And the spirits seem to think it's what I need to. So you can also ask for help to keep stepping through it.
Mm-hmm. Because, in fact, every step you take is stepping into change. And right now, in the whole world, everyone is caught in this pandemic time. Some of us much more painfully and much more drastically than others. But it has an effect. Now it's been going on for over a year, and everybody can feel it. Everybody can feel it in one way or the other. And some people feel like their power is being taken away from it. And for some people, literally, their power is. Millions of people dying. But for those of us who are not dying, something else is happening. And it doesn't have to be bad. And one of the ways to work with this is to ask your spirits, what are the gifts of the pandemic? I know it sounds insane.
For me.
For me.
You can work
right?
for yourself.
Yeah, speak for yourself, right? What are the gifts? What am I being given? Right? And ask your spirits this, because you might be surprised, and that will help you to see it and experience it in an entirely different way.
And there's a question here earlier about how do we work against bad change, resist bad, so-called bad change, climate change, social change, pandemics. And so I just want to talk a little bit about this from our perspective, not only as human beings, but when we work with the spirits. And there are sort of 2 or 3 very important things to consider here. One thing is we don't know if it's a bad change or not. We know it's a change. So we can work with that aspect of it, right? And so then we work with that aspect of it just like any other change. We ask, as we said, maybe what is the teaching for me in it? Or we ask for help to move with it. Or I can ask for help. How can I respond to this change? How can I best respond to this change? So the idea of it being a bad or a good change is something from our perspective, but from another perspective, whether it be the universe or time or spirits, there might be other things going on. So this is why I would definitely come with an intention and a wish to make things better, but not to push it where I think it's going to go. So it's good to ask the right kind of questions. The other thing is that...
Please, it's good to ask the right kind of questions.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
And the other thing that's really important is that when we work with power, when we work with force, life force, and shamanic power, spirit power, we try to never work against something, right? Because you'll be working against. And if you think about power, what will happen? It will either explode or it will just come up against something, and it's a very tiring way to work, and it's sort of a non-natural way to work in a way. So we try and kind of see if we can find a way to shift it to working for something. So we were having this conversation today and talking about certain things going on in the world that we really, really would love it, if they didn't exist, because they're causing a lot of very bad pain to a lot of people. But we don't work against. We don't want that person to go away, or or try and change that person. No, that's not the way. It's not a good way to work, we find. But so we shift instead and see, what can I do? Or how can I help to bring more peace into the world, right? Or how can I contribute my service to this situation? How can I stay connected to the power of love as I step into this situation, right? It might be a very, very difficult and very powerful situation where a lot of people want things that are not very good at all. But if you can just find a way to shift it. Also, I have to say, people that do a lot of amazing work, like I know some of you here do amazing work, social justice work, environmental justice work. If we always work against something, it's extremely tiring and draining over time. If we can find a way to just shift our intention so we work for it, it's similar work, but we feel this for, and it kind of drives us, and it flows, and it connects us to what's really important. And over time, I feel that is one of the most important things that will help you to sustain your energy levels, your motivation, your power, and what it is that you want to do here in life. And I cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah, I have another example of this from my very own life, which is that when I got back from the war in Vietnam and got out of the army, I immediately got involved in the anti-war movement. And I was very active in that for 2 years, in a wonderful organization called the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. And it was a great organization, but in the long run, I could feel that it was taking a lot of my energy. And At about that time, I also discovered the writings of Thich Nhat Hanh, right? And about at that time, I got involved in the peace movement, right? Okay, maybe it was the same thing, but like with a different emphasis, right?
And a different feeling
and
and
a
energy.
different feeling of energy, totally. So that it was empowering for me, right? I wasn't fighting against something, but rather I was standing up for something. A delicate balance, yeah.
That it can really make a difference also in us. And so I'm going to shift into talking a little bit more about balance now in times of change. And so times of change are very often an upheaval, whether that's personal change in our lives or on a social or planetary scale. It's often about upheaval. And what does that literally mean? It means things are moving around. Things are maybe not calm the way they were. So they're in motion. And so this is why we feel it's very important to work with balance and change together as companions, because they're kind of dance partners in a way. And I remember many years ago, I had this idea that balance was something fixed in a way, like I could stand with my 2 feet and I would be totally still and centered and I'd be totally balanced, and I could stay like that for 400 years. And there is something in that, and we'll come to that in a little while. But what I feel much more in life as a human being is that balance is a constant flowing river, constant dance, constant sort of navigation on a sailboat. So you're dancing with life. You're not trying to stand still and have nothing affect you. I want things to affect me. I want to be touched by life. I want to move with life. And so then balance is not a fixed point. It's a way of moving with change.
We were talking about this the other day, and right then I looked at my computer screen and there was a picture of a ballet dancer. But unfortunately for us, it was a still picture, but in a way even more wonderful because it was a still picture, because her body position seemed to be, how can she be not falling flat on her face, right? But the truth of the matter was she wasn't. We knew that she wouldn't be. We knew that if we had the next picture, it would be her maintaining this wild balance, right, in a way, but wild and yet totally empowered balance, right? Motion and impossible motion, right? And I looked at that, I thought, but this is what life is, right? This is what life is. We might think that, oh, it's boring and nothing happens, and I get up and I go to work every day and I come home and I eat supper and I go to bed, right? And if you have a family, there's certain extra things that you attach to that sentence, right? But if you look at your life, in fact, it's every day is one series of miracles after another, right? I remember one time I told a friend of mine years and years ago, we hadn't seen each other for 5 years. He said, "What are you up to now?" I said, "Well, I've really gotten into my shamanic practice." And he says, "Oh, wow, you're a shaman, huh? Well, show me a miracle," right? He was being very sarcastic, This is an old friend of mine, so it was okay. And I said, "You want to see a miracle?" He said, "Yeah, show me a miracle." I said, "Okay, I'll show you a miracle." And I held up my hand, right? And he got it. He got it. Right? Our lives every day are being touched by miracles, and we are miracles touching others every day, right? But because we get these blinders, isn't that what they're called?
Blinkers, yeah.
Yeah.
Blindfold,
Yeah. These guys like the horse in the street, right?
And I think sometimes our wish for balance, certainly my wish for balance sometimes when I'm in a time of change, is like I want a still point in all that movement, all that motion. But I know that that is not really what's going to help. What's going to help is if I allow myself to be moved, allow myself to be in motion, because the change has to move, but be in that motion without being totally blown off or blown up. And so there are ways you can work with your spirits or with life where you can invite balance in, but also learn more about what balance is for you. And you can do this in wonderful, simple physical ways, simply by standing on one leg or standing on your head with incredible attention. And notice, are you trying to control life or are you trying to flow with life? Even such a very small thing can really teach you a lot, and it can be very entertaining as well, but very deep teachings. So is balance a way for me to like interrupt the flow of life because I just want to hold on? Or is it a way for me to have a kind of a rudder as I'm moving with change, so I'm not getting totally lost,
Or a way of stepping into the dance, right? And sometimes people hear us say these things and they think we're talking about living an irresponsible life, just throwing off the yoke of responsibility, right? It's not this way at all. It's assuming a much greater responsibility, right? Because it means that you are stepping into your life aware of your connections, aware of your part, aware of how you are touching the lives of others, right? And taking responsibility for that.
And I find balance in that way can be a moment where I reconnect to myself, or I reconnect to my practice or the things that I'm committed to, and that helps me to find a balance too. It does help me to come back to this place where I remember who I am. I remember what's really important to me, what I stand for, what I say yes to. And then when I've done that, I'll know much better how to respond to the change that is around me. Because sometimes when there's a lot of change, we'll just be running around or trying to catch up or trying to work out what's going on, or be so overwhelmed by emotion it's difficult. So then balance can come in like a good friend and just allow us a little bit of space to remember who are we really, and what is really important to us, and then act from that place, taking responsibility for who we are.
And a lot of people think of responsibility as a yoke, right? But again, it's like the dance that we're talking about, this beautiful ballet, right? Where, I mean, there was a ballet dancer, we stand there in awe with our mouths open because they seem to be doing things which would be impossible for a human being to do, right? Physically. And yet they're doing them, right? And so it is too when we assume this deep responsibility. We're doing things which might have seemed impossible for us to do years ago. But through our practice and through assuming responsibility, we're able to do this amazing life dance. And again, I just want to remind you, you're doing this amazing life dance. Each one of us are.
And sometimes the reconnecting with balance in your life is just a way to remember that. And remember that I haven't lost my way, even if I don't know where I am still here, and just reconnect with yourself or with your spirits or with your family, with the things that matter to you, so that you might not see where you're going, but you know what you're carrying. And that will make a big difference in how we meet change. So it's not to run around so much. And that's why I feel like the balance is also a constant motion. I remember someone came for a retreat here a long time ago, and she went out for a walk, a guided walk, and she came back and said, wow, I could only be in balance if I allowed myself to be unbalanced first. And like every step was a rolling movement between balance and unbalance. And I always remembered that. And it also taught me about that I have to allow myself to be unbalanced as well. If I just want to be balanced the whole time, I just don't learn anything. But I want to reach out for balance when I need it, right? But not grab onto it too much, but allow myself to be touched, to be moved, to be rolled around by life. Otherwise, we never get anywhere, really.
Right.
And the other thing is, I want to say, talk about balance now in a little bit from a different perspective in terms of the spirits and spiritual health. And that is that balance can also be a very, very good friend in times of change, because it can show us what is out of balance in our life. When we talk about healing and illness from a shamanic perspective, it's very, very often because something is out of balance. And so the whole process of transformation in healing, and in shamanic healing, you always have to go through a process of change. And so balance can come in there and help us to see what needs to be redressed in the balance. What do I need less of? What do I need more of? And that change will bring me into a better state or a better place and better healing. So, and whether that is the balance in the elements that you relate to, how much fire you have in your life, how little, how much, for instance, or what kind of food you eat, how much you move, how much you pray, how little, how much you try and help people, or how much or how little you want to receive help. There are so many things to look at in terms of what is that balance. And for me, there is not one nice, neat package to say this is the right way, because I might be going through a period of my life where I need to be in retreat more. And then I go through another period of my life where I really need to take action. And so these things are not good or bad, they're just the right thing at the right time. And so working with balance in this time of change can help you to come to what it is that you really need to either step through into the change or to work more deeply with what's facing you, what you need in your life to be in the right balance to meet it.
That's right, and this is another reason why I really love the shamanic practice, because I can always ask for help. I can always ask for advice. I don't have to figure everything out for myself, which is not to say that I shouldn't try to figure things out for myself, but when I need help, I ask for it. And this is, I think, a wonderful, wonderful way to live, because we are all connected to the earth. We are all here. We're not isolated. We're not alone, even though it sometimes feels that way. But it's at the times when it feels that way the most. This is maybe the universe saying, we're waiting for your phone call. Right? and this is the time to do it.
And so as you're facing change, if you're facing change maybe through an illness or maybe through a loss, or maybe you're having to change home or change job, whether you want to or not, you can also ask for help to see what do you need to rebalance in yourself to help you during this time of change, you know. And it might be, and if you know how to work with your spirits, you can ask them. And if not, you can reflect on this in your life, you know. Maybe you need a little bit more quiet time in order to be able to deal with this. Or maybe you need to reach out more. Or maybe you need to drink less coffee. You know, it's like, so we're always being balanced and rebalanced, both physically and emotionally and energetically and mentally, balanced and rebalanced. And so if we're asking for help to find a better balance to meet this change at this time, that can sometimes really help us as well. And of course, after a big change, whether it's something we wanted to step into or not, or say, for instance, after a funeral or after you've moved home, there might be that time after the change, which is sort of a recalibration, a rebalance. So you don't necessarily want to go back to who you were, but you don't necessarily just want to run off into something else. So that period after a change is often very important to allow balance to come to you in a new way and to recalibrate you and show you, okay, what are you going to need in this phase of your life now? How can you open to that? How can you find it and receive it? There's one more question here that we wanted to address, a really interesting question about if there is any advice for autistic people who do not like change and who find it maybe very difficult to deal with change, and who live in a way that have a lot of structure. And so I just want to address this in a sort of very general way, which is that when we work with healing, we don't diagnose the problem. And if we have 10 people coming to us with a migraine headache, we wouldn't say, oh yes, here is the solution to that. It's not like going to a medical doctor. And in fact, going to a medical doctor, that shouldn't really be like that either, because all those 10 migraines might be for at least 5 different reasons.
Or maybe 10 or 20.
So we don't normally say, oh, here's the problem, here's the solution. So we would work individually with that person, and if they wanted to work with us, and find out how to help them deal with the change, right? And what is the actual problem? Is it that that person who is blessed with autism, are they being forced to have change? You know, is the help actually to really connect to the structures that they've got? Or is it to better be able to dance with life? Or what kind of question do we need to ask here? We need to find out more about the specific situation so we can ask the right question for that situation and that person, and not try to think that one answer is going to be the same for everybody. And yeah, I want to say something.
No, go on. I have something to say, but go on and finish what you're saying.
Well, I was just going to say, years ago, you did a piece of work, and there was a young man with very severe autistic symptoms, and his parent who wanted help, and the spirit said, the child doesn't need help, he's okay, it's the parent that needs help. And that was very, very difficult for the parent to accept. And so this is a lot about perspective. And when we go to the spirits and work with shamanic healing, we always ask to see it through the perspective of the spirits, and they can tell what this particular person might need in this particular situation. And then we can all learn a lot more about the dance of change and balance in life from people who see it from a very different way and experience it in a different way.
Right, and this is a wonderful Wonderful example. This one that we had,
Yeah.
it was a tragic story, really. But and it was interesting because when I read the question, I thought uh, what came to me immediately, and I suppose because I hadn't thought of this experience that we had, what, 8, 10 years ago, I thought, what can you learn from the autistic person? Right? And I know that in a lot of other cultures, non-Western cultures, should we say, people who receive a diagnosis in our culture might be looked upon as blessed in those cultures. And then I came to remember my early library studies of shamanism way back when I was an anthropology student. And at one time in American anthropology, it was quite normal to look at shamans as being schizophrenic. This was a diagnosis. It was when Freudian psychiatry was having a big influence in American anthropology. And so, you know, wisdom comes from unexpected quarters, right? And it could easily come from somebody who's diagnosed as autistic, or it could also easily come from a tree.
And the idea here is not that there is one right way to dance with change or to be with balance, but that it's all about our relationship with it. And so each of us can begin to explore our relationship with change and our relationship with balance more deeply from who we are and from where we are. And so there's not this one right answer that we're all trying to get to. You know, I'm so tired of trying to get to somewhere and living in this sort of perfect ideal state. It's rather that we're constantly renegotiating and re-experiencing our relationship to life and asking for help with that. And I want to say one more thing about this, which is that, again, I would like to say what we said in the beginning and come full circle, is that for me, often the kindest, wisest, most compassionate teacher is nature. And often when I am lost or I feel confused, I'll go out and I will talk to the river or to the sky or to the trees or to the rocks or to the birds and say, how do you do it? And you don't need to talk to the spirit of it. You just go out and like, how do you do it? You know, how do you deal with change? I'm like, I can't bear it. And this is also why we want to do this whole course of Rhythms of Life, which is really life and nature teaching us, this is how we do it. This is how we deal with it. Look, you can do it too, like this. And somehow it becomes so natural, right? And I let go of a lot of my human ideas of things, and I connect more into life and find an acceptance or an understanding in some of the movements of life.
Very often our preconceptions can really hold us back. And so life is an ongoing, beautiful opportunity to learn about life.
I remember once, years and years ago, my spirit teacher was trying to teach me. She said about work, rest, and play. You know, and there used to be this silly ad in England years ago when I lived there, which was about. And but she said, no, it's really important that you begin to understand and appreciate these three aspects of your life equally. And she said, not only must you work with power, you must also learn to play with power and to rest with power. And I really had to think about that a lot for quite a few years, and it's still turning around. But I felt that that is maybe not a place to arrive at, but a place to work with, and to appreciate all the different aspects of life, that they all have their place. They all have, as you were saying, their gift. It's just at different times we need different things.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's really hard to see the gift in it. And sometimes it's so overwhelming we just can't even believe that there's a gift in it.
And sometimes we don't even know what to ask for help for.
Exactly. But then you can just ask for help, right? And you're not in this alone. This is the beauty of this work. With shamanism, you're not alone. A lot of people know that they have spirit helpers, but the shaman knows who her spirit helpers are. And the shaman also knows that it's not her power, it's the power of the universe. And it's by dancing together with the power of the universe that we become empowered, that we find our balance, and that we can really join the dance.
And if you ever feel that you really need some help, but you're not even really sure about where to go or what to ask for, my advice would be just go out and find a tree or a rock, or go and stand by a body of water, ideally flowing, but it doesn't need to. I sometimes love to stand by the seashore with the tide coming in and out. And I find that just being there, either with water, which is always moving and flowing, that's the nature of water, or with a tree or a rock, and just sit there. You don't need to know what to ask for help for, but if there's a lot of change in your life and you feel you're losing your balance, just go and sit with a rock or a tree and ask for help. It can really make a big difference. So it's again remembering that we're not alone, even if we don't know what to ask for. So, and this way, as you were saying, we will be in constant continuation with the flow of life, with the dance of the universe. And for us, I think I can say for both of us, that's a really wonderful way to live. Yeah.
And it's so, I mean, life can be really overwhelming. You can forget that you are in contact. It doesn't feel like you're in contact, but please try to remember that you are. And a lovely exercise that I like to do sometimes is just to stand up and feel my feet on the earth. Right? Because I know the earth is alive. It's bursting with life all around me, especially at this time of year. Coming up through the earth, all these wonderful signs of life. And we're right there with it all.
So it's how we meet it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and how we dance with it.
And step over the threshold right into it. Yeah.